All right, so it's 3:30. We can get started here. Hello and welcome everyone to the first informational webinar of 2023. We're going to talk about some major street projects today. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Nolan Bergstrom. I'm a community planner in the Community Planning and Economic Development Department. Today we're just going to cover 5 or 6 of our major street projects in 2023, as well as talk about some sidewalk and traffic calming work. But I wanted to kind of just outline that, we're going to go through some housekeeping things first, do some panelist introductions because we have some great staff here today to talk about these projects. They'll go over those projects at a high level, and then we'll open it up to question and answer session. So starting with the housekeeping items. So the session today is recorded and will be available on the City of Kalamazoo YouTube page. Once it's on that page, you can share the video with those who couldn't attend today. Today's webinar is also going to include a question and answer session like I mentioned. For this session, attendees can type their question into the Q&A box as depicted by the small picture you see on your screen. You can submit questions during the presentation or wait until after the staff do their presentations, and then we'll address those questions once we get to that session. We'll do our best to address all of these questions, but if we can't get to all of them due to time constraints, you can always reach out via our 311 contact center to ask more questions. And today with us, we have a few of our public services staff. We have our traffic engineer, Dennis Randolph, and 2 of our senior civil engineers, George Waring and Tom Palumbo. And they're going to be talking about these projects today. So they'll cover White's Road, Patterson Street Bridge, which is a project that's underway or will be underway soon. Work along Weston Edge Avenue, Michigan Avenue, Ransom Street, and then sidewalk and traffic calming work. And for each of these projects, we'll kind of generally touch on timeline, total cost, and the funding source, and some of the work being completed, sort of a broad overview. And I make a note here, we'll let staff touch base on this, but some of these projects won't all be completed this year due to varying external factors, including supply chain issues. So just wanted to go over a few things before I transition over to our panelists. Just a reminder that you can submit a question during those staff presentations using the Zoom Q&A feature. You can do that during the presentations or wait till after you hear all the presentations. I'll be monitoring the Q&A box. And once we get to the Q&A session, we'll try to get through each question in a timely fashion. And so with that, I don't know, George, did you want to start with White's Road?
Yeah, Nolan, thanks. I'll go and start with White's Road and Patterson and West Edge, and then Dennis will take the next 2 from there. And then Tom will finish us off with sidewalk and traffic calming. So White's Road, this is a project that is cooperative between the streets department as well as the water department here at the city. So this work is going to be from Oakland to West Edge. That encompasses the whole corridor there. It's going to start this year in 2023 with work completing in 2024. The main reason for that, like Nolan hinted at earlier, is that we have a variety of supply chain issues, most notably in the water main delivery and of both the actual pipe as well as the fittings. So that's something that the city actually preemptively went out for a contract on. We were given about a 50 to 52 week lead time. So we have quite a lead time for pipe to come in, but we plan to have some of that pipe getting installed in 2023 as it gets delivered. And so we would be looking to have part of that roadway done this year. And then we would get that buttoned up and restored for the winter. And then following the winter, we would complete the rest of the project in 2024. And so some of the things that you can see on here that will involve is about almost 4 million in major street funds, and then about 4.8 in water funds. And this is going to involve traffic signal improvements at every intersection. The most notable change is going to be a road diet. So if you're not familiar with that term, what that means is that there will be a center turn lane as a part of the roadway, and still the roadway will handle the same flow of traffic that it handles presently. If you're familiar with the area that White's Road is located in, this would make White's Road look very similar to an Oakland Drive or Parkview Avenue. It's going to have a center turn lane with one through lane in each direction, and then any remaining space in the roadway would be allocated towards non-motorized, both pedestrian and bicycle. So like it says there, there'll be bike lanes, there'll be bump outs as part of the work, and other sidewalk improvements to enhance the crossings at the intersections, as well as any other crossings east-west along the corridor that go through side streets. And so that's pretty much it for White's Road, just a high-level view. We're very excited about this project and looking forward to it coming up and getting started later this year. Patterson Street Bridge. So this project is one that we had originally planned for 2022. It was part of our bridge application with the state. We were able to receive funds for rehab of Patterson Street Bridge, which paid for the rehab of this bridge up to 90%. So that's a really big win for the city, because we actually spent very little in being able to upkeep this bridge, which is a big win for us. We didn't have to allocate funds towards that. So yeah, just big news for us. It was kind of came from a dedicated team able to apply for that grant funding, and we were able to get it. So that work is going to start. It's going to involve a full deck replacement of Patterson Street Bridge. So they'll take up the existing deck and replace it with a new one. That'll help lengthen the lifetime of the bridge. As a part of that, the bridge has to be fully closed. So that closure is going to start Monday of next week. So anybody who takes Patterson Street Bridge, just be aware that bridge is going to be closed starting Monday. And there'll be detour routes posted, as well as more information on our site. And all of that information should be available at that point. And that'll be closed from February 27th. And we're expecting it to be reopened to traffic in September of this year. So that project was again delayed because of water main, because water main was a part of this project. For them to do the bridge deck replacement, they had to remove the old water main from the bridge. And with that, they need to replace it with new water main. So again, the timelines of that were just very long. They were able to get the pipe over the last year. Now they're ready for install. So that's going to start this month. West Edge Avenue, this one's very similar to White's. So the 2023 section of work is going to be as is there in the title, from White's to Fairview. The 2024 work will then proceed from Fairview all the way up to Vine Street. And it's going to be water main replacement along that whole corridor. So as you can see, the funds there are heavily towards the water side of it, because this is one of the primary purposes for this project. We get the added advantage in the streets is that we get to kind of kill two needful things that we needed to get done at the same time, which is to replace the water main, but then also to replace the street at the same time. So we'll be able to get to do that. Part of these funds are coming from our jurisdictional transfer agreement with MDOT, which, if you're not familiar with that, basically we took over streets from MDOT so that we could keep them within the city and make sure that we made them streets that our residents would want to use, and things that mattered to us and not just to MDOT. So we're working with that, as well as a federal grant associated with it. So this is going to involve water main replacement. It's going to be reconstruction where the water main is going in. It's also going to mean traffic signal improvements at most of the intersections along that area, as well as some of the bike lane improvements that we trialed in 2022 along West Edge. We're going to be enhancing those as a part of this project in the section that they're in. And again, this is very similar type schedule to White's Road, where we had supply chain issues that are causing us to just do some work in 2023, and then we'll be completing most of this work in 2024. And that's it for West Edge.
One of the other projects we're going to be doing is Michigan Avenue between Harrison and West Main. We're doing this project for a couple of specific reasons. They are tied eventually to the two-waying project that we're working on for both Michigan and Kalamazoo, but we plan on work being done out on Michigan Avenue. Between April and July, there are several phases that we have to go through. We're going to be doing pothole patching and surface sealing. For users of that street, you know that it's in pretty rough conditions. So we will be repairing that existing pavement. Then we're going to be doing layout changes to the pavement that will include changing the number of lanes for through traffic, and also some change of the uses of the space that's out there. Along the south side of Michigan, we'll have a two-way cycle track, and that'll come from West Main up to about Pitcher Street, and from that point out to Harrison, it'll change to a one-way bicycle lane. We're going to be using that extra pavement. Again, we're going to obtain that extra pavement by reducing 2 through lanes on Michigan Avenue. One of the things we'll be doing is leaving the parking along the north side, and we'll also be leaving the parking along the south side of the street adjacent to the cycle track, and end up with a buffered cycle track. In other words, we'll have along the south side a curb, the two-way cycle track, and then parking, and then 3 lanes of traffic, and then on the north side a parking lane. One of our objectives is to be able to have the street in reasonably good shape for traffic over the next 3 or 4 years as we first work on Kalamazoo and its transformation to two-way, and then get down to Michigan Avenue and transform it to two-way. The only changes you may see in on-street parking, again, may be additional enforcement of already existing restrictions. 30 feet at each of the major street approaches on each side by city ordinance doesn't allows parking, and we'll be enforcing that. Parking in front of hydrants isn't allowed. We'll be enforcing that, but otherwise parking will remain the same. For the two-way cycle track, we will be installing specific signing to direct bicycle traffic, and also doing some bicycle signals, modifying our signal heads to have bicycle phases. Again, this is a pilot project, and we want to test out a variety of items to see how traffic reacts to them. But also, one of our objectives by eliminating 2 of the through lanes is to calm traffic, slow it down. For regular users, you know that the traffic travels way above the speed limit, and that's on all our projects. It's been one of the recurring themes that we need to have people obey the law, the posted speed limit. Again, this work will be broken into several phases. We'll have contractors doing some of it. We'll have our staff doing some of the work. And in the end, midsummer hopefully before activity starts the new school season in the fall, we'll have this all down and all the changes needed that we need to do. On Ransom Street, we'll be working from Walbridge to Burdick, and that work will take place between May and November of 2023. We'll also have some future work in 2024. This is a combined project, about $9.3 million that will involve complete reconstruction of the street, wastewater and water upgrades, including stormwater replacements. We'll have sidewalk replacements that will include bump outs, and we'll be providing for, again, on-street parking that is compliant with city ordinances, but it replaces as much parking as we can provide. We'll be enhancing the lighting along the street, street tree plantings, and we also have to cross 2 railroad tracks, and we not only have to cross the tracks with our road improvements, but sewer water need to be put under the tracks. So there'll be significant work at the railroad tracks that you'll see.
All right, moving on to sidewalk and traffic calming here. We've got, this is broken out into a few different projects. For sidewalks, we've mainly broken this down into 2 projects. We've got what we're calling our gap fill project, and then also our repair project. So gap fill is putting in sidewalk where we currently don't have it. And that's going to be in several locations throughout the city, as well as the repair project, which is repairing sidewalks that we do already have that have just fallen into bad condition, not able to be used. Or another a repair that we commonly do is where sidewalk has been upheaved by tree roots. So we'll be doing both of these projects. Like I said, several locations throughout the city. And then traffic calming is another one that we're kind of doing a little bit in a lot of places. George, I can't remember if you were going to take that one or if I was, but some of that work is consists of these mini traffic circles that we're starting to implement, and then some of it is speed humps, and other. We've got a few other installations that we do as well. Some of these are temporary measures, some of them are permanent. So there's really quite a bit of variety to what we do with our traffic calming. Is there anything that you'd like to add, George?
One thing I would like to add, Nolan, is that for both traffic calming and sidewalk, these are both projects that are funded by our FFE special requests. So these come from the Foundation for Excellence. So these are projects that are handled within the city budget. But these are essentially grant awards from the Foundation for Excellence that we then set in motion and use for sidewalks and traffic calming.
Yeah. So with that, I'm glad you mentioned that. So when we're working on sidewalks around the city, that isn't money that's being taken out of our roads budgets. It's not anything like that. It's purely funded by Foundation for Excellence.
Great, thanks everybody. So I wanted to keep the presentation at that high level so we can dive into some questions, and we do have some questions. I just want to mention again, and everyone is definitely caught on, but you can use the Q&A chat feature in Zoom to ask questions. But I also wanted to say, these aren't all the projects that are going to be occurring in 2023. And you can find out a lot more information and check for updates at www.kalamazoocity.org/projects. And that'll provide same type of information that was provided today. If you can't find your answers there, you can always contact our 311 contact center, and they can help connect you with the staff person if you have deeper questions. But I wanted to start and go through these questions kind of as they came in. So we'll start kind of back with questions about White's Road. So will a bike lane be on each side of White's Road or just one side?
Yeah, so a bike lane on White's Road will be on each side. So there'll be a 5-foot bike lane each side of White's Road.
Someone also asked if traffic lanes are reduced by 50%, how does that allow, or how does it follow that they will handle the same level of traffic that they do now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we have seen, and this is just not within the city of Kalamazoo, but nationwide with any sort of road diets, is that when you reduce travel lanes, what you're basically doing is you're reducing the amount of space that a vehicle can operate in. So quite frequently, roads are oversized, such as White's Road, where you have 4 travel lanes when there's actually only 1 needed in each direction. So we've been looking at the ADT for quite a few years on that road and have the traffic volumes going back for quite a while on White's. And they followed well within the parameters of a road diet. And actually doing the road diet, what that assists with, it actually assists the flow of traffic going through the corridor, as well as the traffic that wishes to turn off the corridor. And it does that by giving a designated lane for cars to pull over into when they seek to do a left-hand turn, which is normally the most delaying movement through traffic. So if you can imagine being on White's Road and you're going down it and you're in the left lane as you're going down and a car wants to turn left, you either have to merge over into the right lane to continue to proceed on, or you have to wait for that car to take a left. In a road diet, what happens is that left-hand turn car has to move to the center turn lane to take that left-hand turn, and the through traffic can continue to proceed. So it actually eliminates a conflict. If a car was to come up on the right and a driver was going through and hurried and didn't see a car in their blind spot and tried to merge right, you would get a side impact. And we see quite a few of those type of crashes on roads that are like White's Road, as well as the traffic crash history on White's Road has a lot of those sort of crashes that are side impact or rear impact from people hitting cars waiting to take a left-hand turn because they're waiting for opposing traffic to go by. So a road diet actually lets the left-hand turning traffic stay in their designated lane, wait for the opposing traffic to clear, make a safe left-hand turn, and lets through traffic keep going straight. So it's a real advantage for the roadway. It actually generally lets roadways handle traffic at a much calmer, much more consistently moving speed than otherwise they could.
So kind of a follow-up to the bike lane question. Will bike lanes be grade separated from car traffic? If they are on street grade, how will the city protect cyclists from cars?
Yep, so along this stretch of White's, what we're doing as part of this project is we're giving as much buffer room to the bicycles as we can. So on White's Road, it's a little bit wider than we would need for a typical road diet with just a bike lane adjacent. So there'll be about a 1 foot up to 3 foot buffer zone between the vehicle lane and the bicycle lane. It just kind of varies by which section of the street you're talking about and what the width at that particular section is. But it's going to be at grade, so we're not going to change the grade that the bicycles are at. But they will have a very thick edge line. The whole route's planned for a 1 foot edge stripe that separates the vehicle lane from the bicycle lane. But it'll be more along the lines of a traditional bike lane and not a protected one.
Great. One other question related to whites, particularly the road diet. Does the current or expected traffic volumes on road dieted streets citywide warrant maintaining a center turn lane? It feels like there's not enough turning traffic to have a dedicated lane.
I think I can answer that one. Over the years, one of the things that traffic researchers have found is that a buffer between opposing lanes of traffic are a real benefit in reducing serious types of crashes, especially head-on type crashes or some angle crashes. Ideally, you put in a median with a curb if you can, but also what they found is that just the painted, basically center left turn lane acts as a median. And again, that spacing of 10 feet or 11 feet between opposing directions of traffic really is a big benefit to crash reduction and driver safety. So that's one reason that we would want to have those lanes rather than, again, keeping traffic going in opposing directions closer to the center of the road whenever we can.
Thanks, Dennis. So someone was asking, Westnedge is another street that has 2 lanes in each direction with no turn lane, at least in certain parts. Is there a plan to road diet Westnedge in the future as well?
I think what we're planning right now is to, as we work on our neighborhood plan down in that area, talk with the folks about the future of Westnedge. One of the things that makes Westnedge different than, say, White's or Parkview or even Kilgore is that the traffic on Westnedge more closely is appropriate for a 4-lane road. And what we would find if we suddenly eliminate the 2 lanes is that we would have and again, we haven't done the studies, but there's a chance that there would be a real serious decline in the level of service, increases in delays and backups. So we're going to be studying that as we get down into that neighborhood and start talking with everybody about the future of the street. No decision's been made at this point, but again, it's one of the options that we're looking at. Certainly, our interest is in calming traffic, slowing folks down, helping them to observe the posted speed limit, the posted legal speed limit. And there are a variety of ways to do that. I think the discussion is open at this point in time.
Someone was asking, will the bike lane on Westnedge north of White's be 2-way or 1-way?
Yeah, so north of White's, there's not a bike lane on Westnedge, and there won't be one on Westnedge. The bike lanes start right around Maple Street on Westnedge and Park Street. And so those bike lanes there will stay 1-way with the traffic on Westnedge and Park.
And could you, George, or one of the other panelists, describe why the bike lanes on Westnedge are along the left instead of the right?
Yep.
Someone was inquiring about that and wondering about traffic lane crossovers and bikers being completely blind when they're using their bike mirrors.
Yeah. Dennis, did you want to answer that one, or did you want me to?
Well, I just might lead into it saying that we've been looking at bike facilities all over the country. And I know just recently I observed bike lanes on the left side of traffic in downtown Washington, D.C. And also we know that there are similar left-hand located lanes in New York City. So they aren't that uncommon. I think we wanted to take advantage of a lot of the auxiliary lanes that were along Westnedge, the left turn lanes that were out there. And we were able to do that easily by putting the bike lane in those areas. We also, again, part of what we're trying to do is help neighborhoods, make neighborhoods a little friendlier as far as non-motorized traffic. And we felt the left turn or the left-sided lanes made basically a bicycle circuit or track around that block, which for so many years between Park and Westnedge had just been isolated because of the speeding traffic. And we felt that could be enhancement. Again, it's a pilot. We've been looking at it. We've got about a year of traffic data. It's not enough to make conclusions yet. I need a couple more years. But I'll tell you, some preliminary review of the numbers is indicating that we're not causing problems with crashes. It appears crashes actually may be going down, but again, it's real early, so I can't speak definitively about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the updates on Westnedge, the other thing we'll be doing with the bike lanes there from Vine to Maple is that'll just, the updates mostly in that area will be via paint with some added temporary bollards or delineators through that section. So if it is something in this kind of pilot phase while we're waiting for more of the informational data to come in on it, it is something that we can alter and change in the future. So even with the updates on Westnedge, we're not seeking to lock ourselves into one particular side or the other, but we're wanting to wait till the data kind of shows us how the pilot operated and what that looks like from a safety perspective.
Great. Before I transition to some questions about Michigan Ave, I had one general question about defining what we mean when we say traffic signal improvements.
Yeah, so well, that's a great question because that varies between each project and each signal, honestly. Some signals have been updated fairly recently for some of their components. So they need rather few components that need updated. Sometimes it's just adding safety features such as backplates to the signal heads or aligning the signal heads with current traffic, or perhaps adding specific messages in those areas, such as no ride on reds and other such information that would improve the safety of it, as well as updating the pedestrian signals. Other signals need full reconstruction. And so we have quite a number of those in the Whites and Westnedge project where we're replacing the whole signals altogether. So a few of those on the Whites project would be at Bronson Boulevard. We're going to be redoing that whole intersection to make it square up and be much more pedestrian friendly, vehicle friendly, and just overall user friendly at that intersection, as well as the intersection of Whites and Westnedge is going to see some significant improvements and a full mast arms put in and a full signal update there. So we say signal updates in general to mean, it can mean a whole variety of things. We'd have to go by project in a lot of depth to get into what's going to happen at each intersection, because it's quite extensive between these projects.
Great, thanks for answering that one. This is another general question, just wondering what the panelists think, but someone was asking if how they'd be able to see any diagrams of what the work will look like.
I would say most of the diagrams we have would be up on the website for anything that's posted at this time. And depending on the type of project that we have and what sort of agreement we have with the consultant, we may not always have good externally facing documents that wouldn't confuse. And so we try to share as much as we can via our city staff for the social media side of things. So just as diagrams come out and as we have kind of user-friendly diagrams, we'll try to get those posted through our city staff to make sure those are up on social media and the website, So it kind of gives people an idea of what's coming. But that'd be the best place to look for them, would be on social media posts for the website.
And I'll add, if someone is looking for more technical documents, I think those documents are available online as well through the city website. You can look at the bids that are out right now. So that is also another opportunity if you're someone who wants to look at that, the technical documentation. So moving on to Michigan Avenue. With this work, will the speed limit on Michigan Avenue be reduced?
We won't be changing the speed limit with this particular project. I think it's a combination of 35 and 30 miles an hour right now. And anybody who uses that street knows that that's not what traffic is traveling. There is a violation of the basic speed law out there. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing again is, and I think modern traffic engineering philosophy is that you design a street so that traffic and drivers go a particular desired speed. It's well known that drivers go down a street at a speed they feel comfortable at. And right now, most people who travel down Michigan Avenue in Kalamazoo, a lot of streets in town, feel comfortable going a lot faster than the posted speed limit. So we're going to be changing the geometry. This first step that we'll be doing this summer, in part, is a bit of a pilot, again, to test a number of things: bicycle signals, reducing or trying the two-way cycle track, doing a variety of things out there. But what we learn will be incorporated in the new Michigan and Kalamazoo avenues that will be the result of our two-way project. Again, one of the problems is that just putting a sign up doesn't necessarily mean that drivers will follow the speed limit. Enforcement is real nice. It takes a lot of effort by the police department to do that. And the fact is, when the police are there, people may slow down a bit. When the police aren't there, they speed back up and go as fast as they feel like. What we found in our analysis for the Kalamazoo and Michigan Avenue corridor is that there is such a crash problem out there due to mostly the speeding, that by changing the streets to two-way operation, reducing the number of lanes, will reduce crashes so much that we'll be able to pay back and save crash costs in 10 or 11 years. And the thing about crash costs is that's not money that comes back into the city coffers. It's money that all the drivers who will avoid crashes don't have to spend. Don't spend on hospital bills or car repairs or any of the other things that happen when you get into a crash. So the real benefit to those projects will be saving so much money for all the users out there. There are going to be some delays. People will take a little longer to go through the downtown area. But the trade-off is that for pedestrians and for bicyclists in general, it'll be a much safer street, and they gain back the use of the streets. And I think that's why we really look at the work we're doing more than traffic calming, but it's making streets for all users out there. One last thing about speed, we are going to be changing signal timings. Again, right now they actually are timed for 30 or 35 mile an hour, depending on the street. But you find that a lot of drivers know that if they exceed the speed by a certain amount, they can actually run through traffic signals at a faster speed. We have funds that we obtained again from the federal government to be able to do signal optimizations that again will match the new geometries of the streets we have out there. And in the end, have a system that will work quite well. It'll be different. People will have to go slower, but also pedestrians and bicyclists have an opportunity to take back some of the street uses. So we're doing a variety of things to help make the streets safer and make them move fairly efficiently.
Great, appreciate that, Dennis. There's a question about describing the bike lanes on Pitcher and Harrison. And I don't know if Dennis or George would like to take that one.
So let's see. I'm assuming this would be in regards to the two-way cycle track at Pitcher and Harrison. So for the two-way cycle track on Michigan, where it hits the Pitcher Street intersection, what you're going to have there is you'll be able to take, if you're on a bicycle, if you're coming along Michigan Avenue, you'd be able to head south on Pitcher Street, taking the bike lanes that are already present there from the Portage Street project that we completed this last year. So you'd be able to take a right and head south on Pitcher Street, going down the Portage Street corridor. Or if you wanted to head north, what you would do there is there'll be a bike box that'd be associated with Pitcher Street that you would then wait in until the signal turns for Pitcher Street heading northbound, and you would cross the intersection at that point, and you could head north on Pitcher, or you could continue to the east on Michigan Avenue. And if you continued to the east, that would take you to Harrison Street, and at that point you would be able to turn north again via bike box, waiting for the signal to turn and enter the shared use path that would start at Harrison Street, going up towards the KVRT, and it would connect up there to the KVRT trail. Hope that answers that question. I saw that one and I wasn't quite sure if that was what exactly that was asking, but I hope that helps describe it a bit better.
That's great. Thanks, George. Kind of wanted to touch on how does the community know when we're implementing a temporary or a pilot project versus a permanent project?
I can talk about that one. So yeah, there's a bit of a range there. The most temporary traffic calming measure I think that exists is just barrels, construction, channelizing devices, what we call them sometimes. And then what we've done, on Winchell and Chevy Chase, is we put these rubber curbs. Oh, my lights just went out. We put up rubber curbs that those ones are a little bit more semi-permanent, but they are still, we see them as temporary measures because they're bolted into the ground. We can take them out at a later time. When I think of a permanent measure, I think concrete. So if you think about I want to say it's Patterson Street on the north side, where you've got there's some places where the sidewalk widens and chokes off the width of the street near intersections. That's poured concrete and that's permanent. So yeah, when I think permanent, I think concrete. Temporary is anything that's bolted down. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell, but if you look close, I think yeah, you can see whether it's something that's just been attached to the road or something that really is part of the infrastructure.
And in that same sort of vein, if we described it as a traffic calming slide, but someone asked what is a bump out? So maybe just a high level overview of what those are and why they're a traffic calming tool.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead,
You want
George.
to talk to that, Tom? Okay. Yeah, so a bump out is an extension of the curb that comes out most of the time. This is at an intersection, occasionally, but it doesn't need to be. But a bump out generally comes out at an intersection, and what this does is it does a couple of things. One, if there's parking on the street, it can actually provide some amount of protection for the parking and create a parking type space that allows for parking to be off of the travel area. And so when cars come through the intersection, they don't incidentally go right into a parked car or the parking space. The other thing a bump out does is when it's at an intersection or at an area where pedestrians are crossing, it narrows the distance that a pedestrian has to cross. So it still allows traffic to flow through, but instead of a pedestrian having to get across 40 feet of space, they might have to get across 30 or even 20 feet of space. The other thing a bump out does is that for a car turning at an intersection, it reduces the area that they have to turn in, which makes them have to turn at a slower speed versus a high speed turn. So it reduces the radius that they're turning at. And when they slow down their speed, a car is going to be able to more quickly recognize a vulnerable user in that intersection, such as a pedestrian or a bike, or somebody pushing a stroller or something like that in the intersection. If they're turning at a slower speed, they're going to see that and be able to react more quickly than if they're making that turn at a high speed. And so the bump out can be used for that's its main purpose as a traffic calming tool, is to make that curb radius a little bit tighter, so cars have to turn at a slower speed, which gives them more time to react to the traffic that's actually in the intersection versus going too quickly and missing somebody in their blind spot.
Great. Thanks, George. Tom, I think, could you maybe describe the enhancements or work that's coming to Winchell and Chevy Chase?
Yeah, so what we did last year, we've got two roundabouts now on Chevy Chase, or mini roundabouts, built with temporary curb, and then we've got the bump outs on Winchell. So as far as enhancements that are yet coming, I'm not familiar with any with what the next thing is for those, but they are temporary right now. I believe we're still in the pilot phase of that. And any permanent actions that we take will be after we see how that goes.
Okay. Jumping back to Michigan Ave, someone was asking, is there any plans or updates regarding the West Michigan Avenue / Howard Street intersection?
We've got some, we have a lot of work planned around there. I believe in 2024, we're going to be doing a project. It's primarily a repaving project on Howard from West Michigan going down to Stadium. There is some, we're looking into options that are going to improve that intersection there. And then we also have planned work on West Michigan going all the way from Howard down to Drake. And that's going to be a bit of a bigger project, but that one's a little ways out yet. We have done a pilot study on Howard with the where there's double left turn lanes. If you're on northbound Howard, turning left to go west down West Michigan, we've reduced from 2 left turn lanes to 1, and been finding that helps reduce collisions. But we have permanent measures in the works, and it's a little ways out though. George, is there anything on Howard? And you know more about that one.
Yeah, so the main work on Howard Street we're looking in is we're actually right now bringing a design consultant on board for looking at that intersection. So they're actually going to do some traffic analysis and using some synchro software to go ahead and anticipate for us what this intersection is going to look like in the future, as well as adding in a potential area for specific U-turns so residents can access Knollwood without having to do an illegal U-turn at the intersection, which we see quite frequently. So we're looking at a number of improvements at that intersection to help both, because that's a main gateway for students to access the university, as well as any visitors to university generally go through that area if they're coming from the west side of town. So we're just wanting to improve that. So that's the main improvements we're going to see over there, just to add to what Tom was saying.
And something else I forgot to mention that we're looking at improving with that intersection is reducing the right turn lane from if you're going eastbound on West Michigan to take a right onto Howard Street. We're going to be reducing the length of that turn lane. Currently, it's a little bit of a unusual configuration with the way that you've got a right turn lane that crosses a bike lane, and then it's very unnecessarily long, it seems, right turn lane, and that's something that that likely contributes to vehicles going through that intersection a lot faster than what we want to see.
I just want to add one thing. We've eliminated left turn lane and we've shortened that right turn lane. What we've also done is been adjusting the signal timing. And I've been closely monitoring that intersection with our traffic cameras and site visits. And I believe right now we've managed to, despite eliminating lanes, we've been able to reduce backups and actually have better clearance on the traffic signals. So that's something we'll be doing. We'll be moving around the city, location at a time, doing adjustments as we tune up our equipment, put new equipment in, and do some other construction work is adjusting signals so that they operate a lot better, hopefully shortening some cycle lengths and doing things that help driver at least feel a little more comfortable at those locations.
Great, appreciate those answers, everybody. Had a sidewalk question. Do the property owners adjacent to where the sidewalks are going to be repaired or installed, actually just repaired, have to pay for some of those sidewalk repair costs?
No. Sidewalk projects are entirely funded by the Foundation for Excellence. So it doesn't come from any kind of property assessment. It doesn't come from property taxes. It's all donation based.
Yep.
Question about bike lanes. Are there been any considerations about using rumble strips to separate bike lanes so motorists don't wander into bike lanes?
Go ahead, Dennis.
I was going to say, yeah, I've used rumble strips around. Generally, we find in urban areas where there are houses, people living, that they are a real noise problem. And I know there's a trade-off between noise and bothering people with noise and the idea of safety. But generally in the urban areas, we tend to shy away from rumble strips where traffic will be running on them, making noise.
Mm-hmm.
As streets are redesigned and biking facilities are added, will there be a trend towards lowering posted speed limits on some of those streets?
I think what we're going to do, again, is on most of our streets, and there's a couple exceptions where you see 40 miles an hour, you either have a 25-mile-an-hour limit or a 30 or 35. That's pretty general around the city. And those are reasonable speeds, I believe, if we can get drivers to obey the speed limit, obey the law. So I think our first go round is going to be to change street geometries laneage, lane widths to try to get people to naturally want to slow down. But we can change speeds, and I think where we see a real problem, we'll do it. But again, without some geometric changes, it requires the police to be out there. And so it gets to one of those balancing acts between um, what police should be doing with their time, and they have budget limitations like everyone. And so it is that big balance. But I think most of our streets, after 2 years here, I haven't changed the speed limit because I think most of the limits are appropriate. Again, except maybe one or two places. The problem is that too many lanes causes traffic to just go too fast. And so we're going to deal with that problem. I also wanted to answer one other question, Nolan, if I could, that about Michigan Avenue and that project and how we're looking at things. There was a question about roundabouts at Kalamazoo and Douglas and West Main as part of the two-way project. And what we're going to be doing is looking at making T intersections at those locations and putting traffic signals in with left turn lanes where they're needed for the cars to turn left. So we are looking at a variety of ways to deal with traffic on all of our projects. I think we're trying to be creative and again, always driven by safety. Roundabouts, we look at just about every type of configuration that's being used in the transportation field today. And we look at, and one of the things that would help us is that when we do have those opportunities for engagement, that people come out and give us their ideas about what they think so that we have a feeling, because often you have to tailor a particular street geometry to a community. And I found that all over the country. So we really do appreciate people engaging with us and giving us their opinions. We can't, we have to make a good safety and engineering decision in the end. But there are projects right now that we are changing because of the engagement comments we've gotten from folks. So we take that engagement seriously, and we want to hear the ideas when we're designing our projects. So we really do encourage people to come out and when there are engagement opportunities and look at our plans and give us their input. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dennis. Another question, Dennis, I think you'd probably be the best to answer this. Has the city considered traffic cameras as an option to aid enforcement of speed limits?
I think a lot of communities have. I've been in communities where we had traffic cameras. Generally, traffic cameras are tied to state enabling legislation, and I don't believe there's that particular legislation available in the state of Michigan right now. Again, one of the problems I've seen with traffic cameras where I've worked in other places is that you get the conflict about is the ticket going to the driver or to the car, which tends to be the legal problem we have to deal with. So are we looking at that right now? Not really, just because the legislation isn't there to be able to do it. And again, I think we feel that hard changes to streets, their geometry, how we build them, are a more effective and long-term way to control traffic speeds. Speeds are a problem here. There's no denying that. And I think, again, in every project, we start out with safety and that speed. When we get 60 or 70% of every driver going down our streets violating the posted speed law, then speed has to be considered in what we're doing, and we do that. But again, it's what the business is finding, what the traffic and transportation profession is finding, is that the real way to control speeds is to build streets that drivers feel comfortable going down, driving on in a particular speed limit. And that's what we're trying to do here.
One question to try to get some clarification is, how are most of these projects funded? Is that from a gas tax or some other resource besides FFE?
Mhm. Yeah, so Nolan, most of these projects are funded via bond funds, what we call bond funds. So with a combination of federal funds that come through our Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO. And so it's a combination of those funds that fund these projects. So the federal funds is generally allocated through the MPO, and as a municipality, we compete for those. So we submit projects, those go and get ranked at the MPO level, and then we get federal funds divvied up between all the municipalities based on those rankings. So we have to compete our projects for those funds. The rest of the funding is from bond funding, which means that this comes from Act 51 bonds, which is not based upon a resident tax, but Act 51 is instead funded differently, and that's more at the state level. And so we get allocated a certain amount of funds through the Act 51 program based on the type of lane mileage we have in the area. I believe it's lane mileage. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis.
Yep, mileage and a little bit of population factor is in there, but it is the gas and weight tax that everybody pays at the pump and when you buy your license plates.
Yep, and so we get a certain allocation of that comes to us, and then we have to use that for both operations. So that goes for us as a city. The Act 51 is spent heavily on operations, so we spend that almost entirely on both personnel to upkeep the roads, and as well as paying for outside contracted services to assist where we don't have the staffing for that. And so it's both those things, and then the rest that we don't have from that, we have to go out for bonds. And so we then pay a certain amount of debt on those each year for these capital projects. So this isn't, that's where that's taken from. So this isn't from general fund or from taxes or anything like that that you might see on like a yearly tax bill from the city. This would be something that you'd be paying at the pump, or that you'd be paying when you get a new license plate registration.
Yeah, one other question, for signs and paint and things like that, is there a standard that you as staff and engineers follow? Is that set by the state?
I think as far as signing payment markings, we follow the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, generally state specifications when we do our work. It is the standard that's used certainly all over the state of Michigan and all over the country. So we stick to that. When it comes to paint, we use standard state specification processes to paint our roads. And again, the signs go in based upon criteria that's generally accepted across the entire country. And there's an overriding federal guidance for the manual that says the kind of signs we put up, the size of them, and where we put them, and we stick closely to those requirements. There are options, there are engineering options that we can do, and we try to be flexible in our applications within those guidelines. And you'll see us doing that from time to time. We try out new signs also. Again, one of the things that we're trying to do is tailor the signs and the pavement markings that we use on a street to the community. Because again, every community reacts slightly differently to those traffic control devices, traffic signals included. So one of the things we're doing is trying to tailor them to how drivers that live in the city, visit the city, go to school in the city, how they react to those devices.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Trying to cover a few of the same question here. But there's a lot of questions about when and where more protection for bike lanes is warranted. So maybe as a group, you could describe, why in some cases just a standard bike lane is used versus in Michigan Ave's case, the piloting of a two-way cycle track with more buffers, more devices to help separate bicyclists and motorists.
I think you said the word right when you said pilot. Again, we're trying to see what works best, not only for traffic and people, but as everybody always mentions to us, when it snows in the winter, we have a particular problem. Our average snowfall in Kalamazoo is 80 inches. And so we have to be able to deal with the snow in our devices. I think for pilots, we try to use a variety of devices that are out on the market and some new devices. When we rebuild a road, that's the time to put hardened devices in, move a curb. But it's very expensive just to pick up, to build a new curb and put those barriers in just for a pilot. We couldn't do any pilots if we wanted to do that. So we're trying to do a variety of things, test some different alternatives, be able to help pedestrians and bicyclists and slow down traffic. And that's a key item. And then as we learn from those items, incorporate those thoughts and ideas into our new street design. So when you see Ransom Street, for example, this year, or White's Avenue, or in a couple of years, Kalamazoo in Michigan, you're going to see the hardened features that people look for. But again, I think it's a way that we can manage the public dollars that we're entrusted with the best and get the best use out of them. And in the meantime, try to make things safer and better for all road users. And again, like I said, we've been watching crashes. It's still early on some of the projects to know what's happening statistically significantly. But the data that I've been looking at is showing that we aren't creating crashes or hazards, and that it appears that crashes may be going down. And again, that's really preliminary. So again, I'm not making a statistical pronouncement regarding that. I need more data. We all need more data to see, but we do have the data and we collect the data. So when we talk about crashes, we're basing it right now. We have 10 years of crash data that we're able to query for all of our streets and use that as a basis for making our decisions regarding the safety of our streets. And I think that's real important. We look at the traffic, we drive around constantly, look at traffic. I watch it on my cameras in my office all the time, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. The fact is we have the data regarding crashes and safety on our streets, and that is what we use to help us make the decisions about what might be the best way to make our streets safer and better.
Thanks, Dennis. So we're getting close to the end of the webinar. Maybe time for two more questions. I know there was a question about removing parking on Westnedge so the bike lanes could continue through the whole street. And I think the reason it was, I think they're talking about the Vine commercial corridor. The reason it transitions away from the bike lanes there is to retain the on-street parking for businesses in the Vine commercial corridor. So if the lanes would have kept going through, that parking would have been removed, and as Dennis mentioned, for businesses that rely on street parking, like Michigan Avenue, we're trying to retain that. Someone else was wondering about the planned street humps in Edison, etc. I think it was referenced on the last slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those speed humps are going to be placed in Edison. Right now we have plans to do that this summer. However, some of that is contingent on federal funding that we are receiving in for some of these pilot projects. So we have to first get a contract with the federal regulators on their end to be able to exercise that funding and use it. But basically what we'd be looking to do is calm traffic, mostly on the east-west roads in Edison that we've had requests on for traffic calming. And so we'd be looking to slow those. A couple of them that I can remember off the top of my head without pulling up a list, it would be like Hayes Park, I believe Lay and Lane in Edison. And there are a couple of others in that east-west spectrum that we'd be looking to calm them. So we'd be placing a speed hump, approximately one per block, kind of in the center of the block between intersections. So that way cars aren't getting up to a high rate of speed between each intersection.
And these are pilots, correct?
So for the speed humps, they'd be permanent because they're a tested feature that we've used effectively throughout the city for a number of years. So those would not be pilots; those would be permanent. However, we are looking to do some pilot work through the federal money in the Edison area, and so we'll be talking further about that with the Edison neighborhood on what those features might be and some additional aspects that they might want to include in that. So if you're in the Edison neighborhood, just keep an eye on the conversations coming through the neighborhood association.
Thanks, George. All right, there's one last question. How is law enforcement being trained / educated on the rights of others to use the road? I know that they have officers in the past few years that have gone out and been on bikes. They've had sensors on their bicycles, and they've ridden different facilities in the city at different times of day. And if the motorist driving past them doesn't adhere to the 5-foot rule within the city, they'll stop that motorist and hand them some educational material talking about our 5-foot rule here in the city and trying to educate our motorists. So to my knowledge, we do have public safety officers trained in the rules of sharing the roads.
Yeah.
Didn't know if the panelists had any other additions to that.
It is a conversation we have, quite freely and openly with our public safety about these different features. And so as we put these up, it's also something that we have a conversation with public safety about. And it's also an area that we, consistently want to make sure everybody's on the same page on the city side, both public safety and public works. And so that's a conversation we try to have on a frequent basis. And, we know there's turnover and rollover between persons in each. And so we try to keep them as updated as we can and also give them the tools in their belt through traffic control orders and official documentation so they can do what they need.
Well, thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Like I said, we'll have this recording posted on the city YouTube channel. So if you know of anyone who wasn't able to attend, you can point them in that direction. So watch the city YouTube channel for updates there. Appreciate your time and have a great rest of your week.
All right. Thanks, Nolan. Appreciate you putting it on.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.